Hello and welcome to Darkness Ascending Presents, the North American Amateur Starcraft League. Season 1, week number 5, game number 1 between two Protoss players, Thanor and Zoure. At least that's what I hope it's supposed to be said. So Zoure is the purple Protoss on the left bottom, and Thanor is the light blue in the bottom right. Today they're playing on Shakuris Plateau, which is a relatively larger map. Specifically, it's a very, very long trip from starting point all the way to if you have an enemy on the other side of the map, it's a really, really long trip. So early rushes is not usually the best thing to do. Lots of times for this, people grab a fast expand, which is really a good strategy simply because of the distance. For your natural, you do have a ramp, but it's a slightly wider ramp, so it's not quite as easy to choke that off. But at the same time, that distance is just so very helpful. Both players already up to their gateway. Zoure is looking to somewhat make use of a ramp block, whereas Thanor is just doing a right inside his base. This is actually an interesting thing with Protoss. On one hand, it is good to make some sort of block for your ramp, especially early game, especially with Protoss, because you have those melee units. Similarly with Zerg, they have a lot of melee units. Making a partial or full block of your ramp is very helpful against them, because then you can take pot shots over your wall. But the downside is when you have something that close to your ramp, especially if you're putting extra stuff close to your ramp, all the other players to do is get vision and get some range units, and they can just take pot shots at your buildings. So it can be a double-edged sword. The good side is that it does make it more difficult for your enemy to move up the ramp, but at the same time, that's also space that you could be using for your units to shoot down below the ramp, and also it puts your buildings in danger of being shot at from a place that you can't really even defend. But alright, both players, Thanor going for a relatively early cybernetic score. Same thing over here. So far, it's the mirror game that Protoss games typically are. Nobody's going for any sort of crazy proxy pylon. One thing that's really interesting about this particular map is that it is connected by destructible rocks. So lots of times you will see people make use of that. If, as a Protoss player, you go really early warp gate, a nice thing you can do with this map is you can drop a pylon right over here, get yourself either a flying unit or like an observer, and then you can just warp in units into their base, and typically they're not really paying attention to this area. Lots of times you'll see a pylon will go down around here so that they can watch the destructible rocks, but most of the time this corner is not quite as well scouted, I guess. Alright, so Zoure is looking like he's going with a more base unit tech. Thanor is going for the somewhat standard robotics facility. You see that a lot in Protoss vs. Protoss, simply because Colossus is so viable in Protoss vs. Protoss. Although, to be perfectly honest, I have been seeing more than just Colossus play recently in my Protoss vs. Protoss fights. I know I've been trying to move away from using them every single game, because I find doing the same thing every game gets kind of boring. So we do have the warp gate tech up. Both players looking pretty good. Oops, my little fraps icon was there. Sorry about that. Alright, took that away. So Thanor has got his Immortal out, has a couple decent base units. Looks like Zoure is looking to come say hello with a bunch of gateway units. Now Zoure actually apparently canceled his Twilight Council and was going now for some Void Rays. Void Rays are actually really good, or can be really good, against someone who's going Immortal Tank. Because lots of times what they'll do is they'll get maybe a handful of Stalkers, get a lot of Zealots because they take a long time to kill, and get a couple Immortals while they're teching up towards Colossus. So Thanor does know that he has some trouble in his front gate. He does have the one sentry. It will be interesting to see if he can make effective use of it. So here we got the ramp, and looks like Zoure is going for it. He's pushing forward, and oh, he gets trapped right. And that's an important thing to point out. That was a great force field. You trapped off not the whole army, but just a couple of them. And what that does is it makes it so that you get 3 entirely free wins. You notice he didn't lose a single unit out of that little fight there, and moreover, nobody was even hurt. So that was a really well placed force field, and something you should look to do whenever possible. So you see Zoure, he's looking to get his fast expansion. He brings out the 2 sentries because